Over the last several weeks, we certainly have experienced some scary and anxiety-producing moments, especially when it comes to the rise in anti-Semitism on a local level. Following the incident at Temple Beth El just a couple of weeks ago, where as parents and for grandparents and community members, it hit so close to home, the need to have a conversation about how we can personally cope and how we can parent through our own fear. The impact of social media amidst this rise in anti-Semitism has really become even more important. I am so grateful to our partners at ADL, Carolyn Normandin and Emily Broder, Julia Cohen from JFS, Dr. Erica Bachnick, and Alexandra Wyatt, a victim advocate from the Attorney General's office, for joining us this evening to help provide us with resources and tools to better manage our current realities. Thank you all so much for making the time to be here to present this evening. Many of you have submitted questions ahead of time, and we'll get to those towards the end. If you have additional questions, please feel free. You can send them in the chat to the host. And as a reminder, please keep your computers muted so that we can focus on our speakers rather than background noise. I am going to hand it over now to Carolyn Normandin, who's the Regional Director of ADL, who can help share some resources with all of us.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Gordon. Can everybody hear me? Just give a thumbs up. Yes, great. So thank you very much for inviting ADL to participate. I'm here with our Associate Director, Emily Broder, who's going to be participating in this, this topic with me tonight and with all the rest of the guest speakers. You know, this is a community that's in pain right now, and people are anxious, and with good reason. There have been a lot of incidents that have been reported in the last several years. And the rises in anti-Semitism have been high. And for those of you who've heard me speak before, either at Temple or in other places, you know that I've been talking about why it's important for us to be part of the conversation. So I'm going to ask Emily to go to the next slide. At ADL, we do a lot of things. The advocacy and assisting with creating laws and things like that, that's a topic we can cover another time. Many of you have participated in some of ADL's education and training. That's a really crucial way of looking at things. Certainly, this is a bit of education, and Emily's going to give a lot of good resources on how you can fight anti-Semitism on your own. The investigation and research piece of it is really what we're here to talk about tonight, because we're talking about anti-Semitism tonight, even though as I said, it's been on the rise for several years. And this is an insidious kind of a thing. And why is it important for us to even talk about anti-Semitism, and why do we investigate? And I'll tell you, we have to have friends in the room when we need them. And I saw Chief Patton on, you know, the Chief of West Bloomfield Police. That's really a crucial friend and a crucial person in law enforcement. We must continue to develop those relationships. And the other part of it is, those of us in the security area or with ADL and tracking data, it's really important that we have experience dealing with tough issues. And, you know, when an incident like this goes public, we're reminded that we have to really be vigilant. And I want to remind you that anti-Semitism comes from all areas. It comes from the left, it comes from the right, it comes from jihadists, you know, it comes from jihadists who are really anti-Jewish all the way. It comes from people like Louis Farrakhan and the Black Hebrew Israelites. I want to be very clear. These are not Jewish people of color. Black Hebrew Israelites do not practice Judaism. And you see that in the newspapers these days. And so it's really that the Jewish community has been attacked from all sides. And as Jews, it doesn't really matter where it comes from. The most important thing is, how do we deal with it? Each one of these different areas is dealt with in a different way. You deal with BDS on a college campus in a different way than you deal with an incident that involves law enforcement. But the thing that must happen is we must stand in solidarity. So let's go to the next slide. People ask me all the time, why is it rising? Why is anti-Semitism rising? Well, I'm going to go with the box number 2, the political social environment. Extremists feel emboldened. People in some positions of authority have normalized anti-Semitism or have not called it out. And so it kind of gives rise to that. Ignorance and disinformation fuel anti-Semitism. Conspiracies fuel anti-Semitism. And really, when you think about the anti-Semitic tropes like greed or Jewish power or Jewish authority or any of that, those are all rooted in conspiracy theories. And again, we could spend an entire evening talking about the myths. But what I really want to talk about is sort of the internet and social media piece of it. So then let's go to the next slide, Emily. You know, we've seen big rises in anti-Semitism. Social media continues to be a problem. This is happening locally, nationally, and globally. And when you're talking about anti-Semitism on the internet, it's very pervasive. And anti-Semitism is fueled by social media. Why? Because it's easier to encrypt information. It's easier to spread conspiracy theories. It's easier to disseminate hateful messages, even unknowingly, as well as knowingly. And you've heard me talk about the difference between disinformation and misinformation. Misinformation when you make a mistake, and disinformation when you're really trying to sow discord, or really trying to, make sure your point of view gets put out there regardless of the facts. I would call social media the super spreader of the anti-Semitic virus. And in fact, ADL just signed on to an amicus brief to the Supreme Court looking at Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act. And we're coming out very clearly saying freedom of speech does not protect somebody from providing disinformation and true unauthoritative information on the internet. So not all incidents are reported to the ADL, but the incidents that are reported to the ADL, we work with local law enforcement, and we want to make sure that we leads to as many arrests when there's a chargeable offense, and then as much education when an incident does not hit the level of a chargeable offense. And I would call that, sort of a harassment type incident, or something that happens in a school where crime has really not occurred. Let's go to the next one. So I think the most important thing is we can do a lot of things. And this is where the average person can help. You must take a stand. We cannot give in to apathy. You must know the facts. Emily's going to give you lots of resources so that you can arm yourself with information. You must expect the schools to be hate-free. And what I mean is demand that your schools be hate-free, because a lot of this is being sown, and the level of anxiety that we're facing is really, really shifting because it's coming up from, places like school locker rooms or swastikas on desks, carved into desks, or community efforts that kind of where people throw something out there and against Jewish people, and really expect people to kind of commonize or learn about, accept that to be true. Digital hate is thriving. We must call it out. We must tell our influencers and our lawmakers, this is an area where you can be tremendously vigilant. When you see something on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or any of the social media platforms, there is always a button on how to report something. And if you don't get satisfaction, or even if you do get satisfaction, report it to the ADL as well. We track it. We must petition for stronger hate crimes laws. And Emily and I work with people in the background. We've got a lot of plans for next year because there's some things that have changed with our Michigan legislature that will allow us to perhaps strengthen the Michigan state statute, which is the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. Ask your political leaders to continue to fund security. The bill for funding security is in the House. It passed the House. It's going to go to the Senate. So make sure that you understand where it is. Report. Even when you think something is small, report it, because data drives decisions. You can change a swastika on a sewer made out of wood chips into a peace sign very easily, not as easily as just actually moving the wood chips, but you all have a role to play. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Emily, who's going to give you some real tried and true resources.
Thanks, Carolyn. Hi, everybody. I'm Emily Broder. I'm the Associate Director at ADL Michigan. And tonight I want to share with you just a few key resources that we have. You could really take a deep dive into our website, and I encourage you to do that. But today I'll just highlight a few that will be really crucial in responding to anti-Semitism. So the first thing I want to show you is the guide, Empowering Young People in the Aftermath of Hate. It's downloadable on our website, and it's geared toward families and educators. So it contains guidance for parents on discussing hateful incidents with kids, as well as lesson plans that teachers can use in the classroom. When you're considering these discussions, keep in mind that most kids most likely already have some level of information, or like Carolyn said, misinformation or disinformation. They're on social media, they're hearing conversations in schools. They also overhear adults having conversations, and they even pick up on our anxiety when we're thinking about or talking about or responding to events that are going on in our own lives. So the guide includes question starters for children of all ages. For the youngest kids, you really want to start with the basics. You can ask questions like, what do you know about what happened? How do you feel about it? What questions do you have about the incident? So these questions will help you gain an understanding of any misinformation that they might have and how you can help them respond to the incident, or how you can help them heal in the aftermath. For older kids, you can also graduate to more sophisticated questions that will lead to a deeper conversation. You can ask things like, in what ways do you think bias and intolerance played a role in what happened? So all these questions are right in this guide, and you always want to be sure to share the safety and security measures that are in place to help kids stay safe. Anytime you have a conversation about an incident, it is so important to tell them what the grown-ups in their lives are doing to keep them safe. The next tool I want to show you is our incident reporting form. So this is linked at the top of ADL.org's homepage, or you can go directly to ADL.org report incident. Now, on the left side of your screen, you'll see kind of the steps to take when you experience an incident. And these are really important when you see something like graffiti or destruction of property, vandalism. People often want to remove any indication of a hateful act. We don't want to see a swastika on the sidewalk or hateful graffiti on our schools or synagogues, but it's really, really important to gather evidence before you remove it. So document the incident. If you see graffiti in a public place, be sure to take pictures, just like someone did with that swastika on the sewer grate. Take a picture before you remove it, before you turn it into a peace sign. Report the incident to the appropriate authorities. Report it first to law enforcement if it is a matter of safety and security, and then go and report it to our forum. Like Carolyn said, we partner with law enforcement, we partner with other community organizations, and it helps us all to have these incident reports. And then, of course, speak up against hate. So the other thing that I want to share with you is ADL's has strategies to respond to anti-Semitic incidents. And these are just basic steps that you can take when you experience anti-Semitic comments, things that might happen in your daily lives. And the idea being here that we want to stop hateful comments, microaggressions, things that someone might not even know are offensive comments before they rise to higher levels. So we could teach, in fact, ADL does teach entire classes on this, but tonight I just want to share 4 basic strategies. So the first one is ask a question. If someone makes an anti-Semitic statement, oftentimes they don't even know that what they said was offensive. So if someone says something like, well, you don't look Jewish, you might respond just by asking, what do you mean by that? Another strategy is just to explain the impact of the offensive comment. You can also point out that the comment applies to universal behavior, that it's not necessarily applicable just to a single group of people. And finally, you can respond to anti-Semitism by explaining the historical context of a remark. Now, it's important to understand the origins of anti-Semitic stereotypes and tropes. And ADL has a series called Anti-Semitism Uncovered. I'll link to it in the chat when we're finished. It's a guide. It's a guide that is really easily accessible. It contains videos that explain and debunk 7 common anti-Semitic tropes. I also want to let you know about a few other great resources that we don't have time to go into tonight. We have a series of table talks that can guide family discussions on topics of national interest like Black Lives Matter or overturning Roe versus Wade. There's also a Books Matter series, which is a collection of titles with a wide range of multicultural topics. Additionally, we work in schools and universities to present anti-bias education, anti-Semitism education, Holocaust education, and bullying prevention. And I know that was a lot of information, but I hope you'll take some time to explore the resources on our website, and please reach out to our office if you have any questions. Now I'd like to pass it on to Julia Cohen, the Youth Mental Health Coordinator at JFS.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Cohen, and I'm the Youth Mental Health Coordinator at JFS and also one of the co-leaders of our crisis response team. So I'm here today just to briefly share about our crisis response team and how you can go about accessing our assistance, and also to provide just some foundational information about stress reactions and trauma, as well as some helpful strategies before I pass it off to Dr. Bachnick, who will go much more into depth on these topics. So I first just wanted to share that if you are struggling, our crisis response team is an available resource to you. So about a year ago, a group of staff were trained by the Israeli Trauma Coalition to be able to provide both response and intervention in the aftermath of a crisis or traumatic event. And they also helped us to develop a training to train additional staff throughout JFS and also throughout the broader Metro Detroit Jewish community. So we currently have about 30 trained crisis responders with additional trainings planned for the new year. So if after the presentation tonight, you feel that you or a loved one could benefit from meeting with one of our crisis response team members, you can always call JFS's Resource Center at 248-592-2313 and request a one-time completely free consultation with one of our crisis team members. So I just wanted to share that that is available, and you're more than welcome to reach out to us. And then I also wanted just to share a bit about what we can really expect or experience in the aftermath of a crisis or traumatic event. So when we witness firsthand, hear of, or even learn about an event, such as what occurred at Temple Beth El, that is deeply disturbing, shocking, and totally outside of our normal experience, we can feel very unsafe and very uncertain. And that feeling of danger and threat can be reinforced each time we read about it on social media or hear about it on the news or talk about it with others. And this can result in us feeling very overwhelmed and helpless and can trigger our built-in physiologic stress response. And so while everyone's reactions to these types of events can vary tremendously, I do also want to assure you that this stress response, if you're having some of these symptoms, is an absolutely normal reaction to an abnormal event. So it is normal and expected, because really at the end of the day, we are biologically and physiologically hardwired to detect threats and respond to them to keep ourselves safe and out of harm's way. So you may have heard of the fight, flight, or freeze response before, and that's very much what we're talking about. So in this way, stress is really much more than just an emotion or a feeling or an emotional reaction, but really something that we feel throughout our whole body and is really a whole body experience. So in the midst of or in the immediate aftermath of a crisis, we can often feel overwhelmed and even temporarily maybe unable to cope. So for most, with time, these symptoms resolve and individuals can return to their baseline functioning. But for some though, due to a wide range of different factors, that scary and unpredictable time of crisis can actually end up being processed inside their brains and bodies as trauma, and that can disrupt lives for much longer. So I know you may be asking here, how do I know if I'm having a stress response? How do I know if I may benefit from some additional support? So I do want to just very quickly provide an overview of some of the common symptoms that you or your children may be experiencing. And if they do continue to persist without relief, additional help and some support may be warranted. So this list is not all encompassing, but I tried to capture most of the symptoms that you may experience. So in terms of physical symptoms, there may be elevated heartbeat, trouble breathing, digestive issues, weakness, trouble sleeping or pain. Emotional symptoms can include constant worry, helplessness, anger, irritability, indifference, apathy, sadness, emotional dysregulation or not really being able to control emotions, feeling overwhelmed or experiencing guilt. Cognitive symptoms can include memory issues, confusion, inability to concentrate, difficulty in decision-making, organizational issues, difficulty processing information, and some rigid or black and white thinking. And then last are the behavioral symptoms. So we may be impulsive, aggressive, hostile, feel very restless. We may alienate ourselves or isolate ourselves. We may withdraw from others or from kind of social life in general. We might experience kind of tension or stagnation. And in our little ones, we may even see developmental regression. So maybe loss of developmental skills that they previously had. And so with that, I do just very briefly want to share some basic strategies, and then Dr. Bachnick will share a lot more of things that we can do to address these symptoms. So in terms of the physical symptoms, we would recommend, engaging in deep belly breathing, making sure we really are breathing. Movement and exercise can be helpful, nutrition as well as vagal tone exercises. The emotional symptoms, it can help if we practice mindfulness, however that looks like for you. Practice self-compassion and empathy and allowing just the emotions to exist. And then for cognitive symptoms, focusing on the things we can control, breaking things down to smaller or more achievable tasks, creating small successes for ourselves, continuing with our normal daily routines the best that we can, and to take back a sense of power and control in wherever small pockets we can. So in summary, really, if I can leave you all with anything, I just want to say that if you are experiencing any of these symptoms, they are normal and expected. You are responding in a very normal way to a very abnormal and scary situation that occurred in our community. And also recognizing that it involved our children, which adds an extra level of anxiety. But I also always like to point out the strength and resilience. And I can see that there's a lot of that just in this very short time with you. First, you chose to log on at 7 p.m. on a Monday night to join the Zoom, which shows me you're already taking action, you're taking control and really wanting to do something. And another is recognizing that you're not alone. So here you are in community with almost 200 people. So recognizing that we're all together and here to support one another. And then just third, recognizing and reiterating that our community has help available and a response in place should you need further assistance. So again, please feel free to reach out either to me directly or to call our resource center. And I can throw that phone number in the chat for all of you. But again, it's 248-592-2313. And so please feel free to reach out to us if we can be of any support. So with that, I am going to pass it off to Dr. Bachnick.
I just want to share my screen with all of you, but sometimes that just takes me a minute. I apologize. I can hear that we're trying to move quickly here and get to questions. So let me just see if I can do that a little bit faster. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Erica Bachnick. I'm a professor at Wayne State. I am adjunct faculty at Michigan Medicine. I'm the founder of a new organization called Convo, and I've been studying trauma in young children for about 20 years. And although I'm sorry for the reason that we're all together, it always makes me happy to be able to talk with my own community about the mental wellness of our youngest kids. I'm going to talk to you tonight about some scientifically based ideas about trauma, young children, and healing. You'll hear me agree a little bit with the presenters who have come before me, and you might hear actually some tensions as well that we can talk about. To begin, what is trauma? It's actually a completely normal human phenomenon, and that has served as debate, a really interesting debate, I think, in the field for about 50 years about how we can even define trauma. It really refers to the ways that change or unexpected events can create some sort of impact. And then what that impact isn't necessarily a specific list of symptoms, but it can be really expressed or seen or felt in all kinds of different ways, often depending on what is happening prior to, during, and after the traumatic experience. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. Some other key features about what makes an event traumatic is that it often disrupts normal routines and patterns that serve as a way that we anchor ourselves. We experience it as threatening in some way. Either it disrupts our expectations about safety, but that can also be our expectations about psychological or emotional safety as well as physical safety. And finally, it tends to have an existential component. So it's stressful, but it also forces us to feel some sort of conflict about assumed meanings we derive about other people, the future, the unknown. And the unknown in and of itself can often feel scary and like something that we don't regularly discuss and process well enough in the first place. What happens for young children is in some ways a bit of a neutral phenomenon. The ways that they experience trauma and where the meaning is most derived for them is in a couple of places. One, specifically and primarily, is that threats that seem imminent and proximal in their primary relationships are experienced often as the most stressful, the most traumatic. If they have an immediate disruption that they are aware of harm or threats to their own safety. But the other thing sort of really interesting and broadly very beautiful about young kids is that they're engaging in what's called the symbolic world in the early childhood years, which means they are constantly paying attention to all forms of communication coming at them from adults about who they are, what relationships mean, what patterns mean for what they should expect and believe from all the people in their life. Believe it or not, young children really love rules and are absorbing rules in terms of patterns all the time. So sometimes trauma occurs because there's some sort of crisis or conflict in what expectations were about how the world should work. But the interesting thing about trauma is that we often refer to them as being very resilient. And the reason we say that about them, the word resilience itself actually is quite fraught, but the reason we say that about young children is because their short-term memory centers in their brain are firing much faster than ours are. And their long-term memory centers are not lighting up in the ways that ours are. So in other words, it's flipped. Children are incredible learners. Their short-term memory is helping them to absorb information all the time. And what adults are doing in stressful moments is reaching back into their history. The emotional experience of what they're going through helps them to say, when have I felt this before? What was it? And what did I do to deal with it? And sometimes that means that traumas or stressors link back to other experiences, and that can include intergenerationally expressed experiences. And your experience of the present moment is mapping onto that history. Children are not doing that. What they're doing in the moment is looking around and saying, what is happening? Let me look at the adult's behavior. Let me look about how the adults are interpreting this. let me look at the right now and say, how should I be feeling about this? But that also means that they're very open as the days go on to absorbing new patterns and new social rules about the things they experience. That's the good news. So what does healing look like? In the lives of young children, if something happens that's stressful and there's clearly something disruptive for them in terms of how the adults are responding, it's really important that you walk the walk of healing. And that means be very predictable. It doesn't mean rigid. Sometimes rigidity actually can feel unpredictable if that's not how you normally function, but generally follow through and do the things that are normal and have emotional manifestations that are relatively predictable to the child. If you're someone who expresses feelings all the time, trying to be over-regulated and calm can actually have a more disruptive effect for children. But the opposite is true. If you find yourself to be a relatively sort of neutral / flat-ish presentation style, and then all of a sudden you're sort of histrionic, that can feel really disruptive to a child. So you want to self-monitor that way. Be clear. If they have questions, answer them. Be clear in what you think and feel. This is another problem with this sort of, thinking about that I think is really popular, like on social media about parenting, that we should overregulate and be calm all the time. Children, because they're learning all the time, can really sense if you're trying to portray something to them that you don't feel. So it's important that you're like authentic and clear. Be very present. If you have a lot of nervous energy or a lot of like wondering energy, channel it into a lot of love and nurturant practices. And finally, be proud of being Jewish. When there's a threat, when you feel a threat to your identity, when you start to have some of that existential threat where you maybe had been living your life not that aware of discrimination against minoritized groups for whatever reason to do with your positionality, one of the most important known healing practices is to really embrace the positive aspects of all parts of your identity. And I do just want to say here, and I had meant to say when I started talking, there's actually like a dearth of research about contemporary modern responses for young children to anti-Semitism. What we know and what we learn across all disciplines when we are helping families and supporting families in trying to heal and respond to discrimination, we largely are learning from Black women scholars about how children are parented and supported in community to deal with racism. And I do think it's important that we really try to better embed and contextualize our conversations and broader conversations about racism against all types of minoritized groups. Having these kinds of experiences give us so much power to leverage our privilege and be really true co-conspirators to one another. This is a quote by a famous psychologist. I think this is a Judith Herman one. And this really, I think, hammers home the idea that psychological trauma at its core, the reason it hurts and harms and smarts later is because this like defining feature about it has to do with relationships, the way that it makes us feel disempowered and disconnected from community, from ourselves, from one another. And so it is just so ultra important. This is why I say like Jewish identity, Jewish pride is so central to healing from trauma. Even when the trauma is not explicitly directed at your Jewish identity, really embracing this really beautiful community-based part of yourself is an important pathway to healing, and you can't heal without it. And this is why I said there may be some tensions in the things that I say. I really long ago let go of the idea, having worked with so many different populations where trauma is experienced in so many ways, there's just no way to bootstrap your mental health. And we love these psychological practices that give us a sense of empowerment and isolation, but taking a moment is a short-term strategy. For long-term mental wellness and healing, we really have to think about deepening and strengthening our community connections. Some of you asked specifically, what do we say to young kids? Just like any conversation that feels tough for adults, you really have to understand that little kids, because of this like really, high firing short-term memory, these conversations are not fraught for them. They don't have your history and your affective history around these topics. They just have questions, and they're in some ways neutral that way. Even when they're having an emotional expression, their sadness is not your sadness. And you sort of have to, I think, develop some courage and confidence about, I like to just sort of say, being normal and human when you talk to kids. Be present, answer questions. I don't necessarily agree with the idea, although I know this is a very popular idea, so there's many good people disagreeing with me. I don't agree with the idea that we should ask questions about what they already know first before we start talking. I think for children, that puts them in a position of having to generate language and articulate their ideas. And what children do well is to communicate in all manner of ways without words. Words are like, we like words, but they just want to talk and connect. And sometimes the words they're using and even the questions they're answering aren't exactly what they want to know anyway. So I think it's important just to be present. And when they ask questions, you answer them. And then once in a while, maybe you initiate conversation and say, we should always really be able to talk to each other about being Jewish, what it means to be Jewish in the world. Sometimes my experience of this is this, and sometimes it's this. And then you kind of leave the conversation alone. And what you're doing is creating an environment in your home for conversation to flourish. I think it's really important that anytime you have a conversation with a child about a hard topic, what you're really thinking to yourself is, it doesn't matter what I say, it matters that I send the message that I'm a person to come talk to about this. And then you can be as awkward as you need to be, you just make sure you're creating that space. One very specific thing that I want to say is that after traumatic or stressful experiences, but even not after, just in general, it's really important to amplify adult leadership at all times. The adults are here to keep you safe. We're on top of it. Even when I don't know the answer, I know that there's another adult in our community who does know the answer. I'm going to get it, or I'm going to have faith, right? But you're role modeling. We lean on each other, and the adults are in charge, and you're safe. It's my job to keep you safe. In general, outside of this incident, the other thing you can do to be able to have really good strength-based conversations with your children is be talking all the time about this broader context. If you're only now wondering, how do I talk to my kids about anti-Semitism, that gives you a signal that you have some growth in general to introduce conversations in the home about some of these broader questions. How do you talk about racism in general? And then how does this become part of that conversation and really empower your children to exist on different ends of the spectrum, depending on what we're talking about and what's going on in the world? I really like to talk to my own kids about motivations versus impact. Feelings and intent is not an excuse for impact and harm. And sometimes we talk about that in terms of our own behavior. We say sorry before we explain why we did what we did. But sometimes we talk about it in terms of others, like that person acted in a harmful way, full stop. Doesn't matter if they were having a bad day. Doesn't matter if something else had precipitated it and it was complicated. Harm is harm. I like to use statements about wonder to promote flexible thinking. When we talk about harm and other people and us, we also pair it with statements about compassion. People who behave in harmful ways there's no throwaway people, the anti-racism folks like to say. We all are capable of learning and growing. And in general, we have a value that we talk a lot about around shared responsibility for this world. We often get stuck on this thing about validating emotions, but I just wanted to show you real quickly, but listen, reach out to me. I can talk to you about this more another time. Feelings and emotions are actually only one internal mental state that children have. Here are some of the others. And so when children are telling us what's happening internally, we don't have to keep digging, assuming that there's a feeling under an iceberg somewhere. It's just one kind of mental state. And want, for example, is its own mental state. Sometimes you just want ice cream, and it's not because you're having some complex disappointment around right? And to really show our kids that we're here and we're present for conversation, it's important that we're able to validate their internal states in a broad way. And I think that's it. I think that's questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bachnick. I'm going to turn it over now to Alexandra Wyatt, who does victim advocacy at the Attorney General's office.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here, Rabbi Gordon. I really appreciate it. My name is Alex Wyatt. I'm a victim advocate in the Hate Crimes and Domestic Terrorism Unit here at Michigan Department of Attorney General's office, but I'm also a member of the Jewish community. I was born and raised in West Bloomfield. I had my bat mitzvah at Temple Israel, and Rabbi Josh officiated my wedding. So this hits home to me as well as it does professionally. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time with you tonight, so I'm going to go through things rather quickly. But if you ever have any questions or concerns, I will give my contact information at the end, and I'm happy to answer them. So, real quickly, the Hate Crimes and Domestic Terrorism Unit was created in 2019 by the AG after she realized that there was a need for dedicated resources because of the rise of hate crimes. And so what our unit does is we investigate and prosecute hate crimes and domestic terrorism. We work with law enforcement to provide resources. We do education opportunities like this and meeting with groups. And then we coordinate with local, state, and federal law enforcement on criminal cases. I think what's most important, though, for this topic tonight is to discuss what is a hate crime. And I think we get a lot of questions between what is a hate crime and what is a hate and bias incident. And so let's start with the crime, right? It's a crime that is happening. So it can be a property crime, an assault, arson, any type of crime at all. But the reason the crime is happening is because the person is targeted because of their race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, or disability. That is a hate crime. What's a hate and bias incident? It's when actions that don't rise to the level of a crime occur, but they are still targeted because of those same factors: race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, or disability. This is a hate and bias incident. And so why does that happen? That's because we have free speech, right? The non-threatening speech is protected under the First Amendment. So that means people can post hateful views online, that they can call and voice anger. They can organize and gather and promote and circulate offensive materials. But what's not protected are true threats. And that's a serious expression of intent to do harm to another person. But I think it's really important for us to understand that it doesn't matter if it's just an incident or a crime. The impact of hate is great. And regardless of what it is a message. It is a message to a whole community. It has a greater psychological impact than just one individual, but rather the whole community feels isolated and withdrawn. That's why when something happened at Temple Israel, our community is feeling it here. When something happens in like the Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, we feel it here. Or when something happens back in Israel, we feel it here because this hate impacts everyone. So what can you do if you're a victim of a hate crime? Report, report, report. Even if you're not sure that maybe it's not a crime, maybe it's just what she said, like a hate and bias incident, I shouldn't report it. Still report it. Let us be the judge of that. Save all the evidence, exactly what Caroline and Emily talked about. You don't want to wash the graffiti. As much as it's painful to see, you want to capture that. You want to take photos. You want to write down the description of the person. Or maybe it's happening on a holy day. Maybe it happened on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur or on Sukkot. These are all important factors to keep in mind and to report. But for my sake and my role, I want you all to know that victims have rights. They have rights under the Michigan Crime Victims' Right Act, which is in our Michigan Constitution. And my role is to make sure that your rights are protected throughout the entirety of the criminal justice system. So if you come and make a report, you have the right to be notified at every course of that criminal justice system, and everything that happens, your rights are protected. So I have some resources here, along with the resources that everyone else has produced today. These are helpful to connect or just talk to someone confidentially. But really, if you want to make a report for a hate crime, if it's emergency, please call your local 911. You can call the FBI, has a 24-hour line, but you can also report it to us. You can reach out to me directly or at our hatecrimes@michigan.gov. And then if it doesn't rise to the level of the hate crime, there's Michigan Department of Civil Rights. I know I went through that really fast and it wasn't enough time to really dive into all of that information, but I'm so happy that I could be with you here tonight. Please take a picture of my information. Call me if you have any questions or concerns. I'm always here, and thank you again so much for having me.
Thank you so much to all of our presenters. Thank you for sharing these resources. We will be putting together an email to send to all of you with contact information and some of the resources that have been shared. So in case you weren't able to click on the links or didn't take a picture fast enough, look for that tomorrow morning. Many of the questions I think that so many of us have been answered throughout the presentation, but there are a handful of others, some that have been submitted through the chat and ahead of time that really go to all of our presenters. So I want to maybe just start, Dr. Bachnick, you talked to us and shared how we can talk to our children. But one of the questions that was asked was, is there an appropriate age to really start having this conversation?
I think that it's important to think about what happened here as a slice of identity more than a sort of part and parcel of violence. So there's never a good age, to be honest, to talk to your children about violence. Depending on your positionality in the world, it is a burden placed on you as a parent by circumstance more than like when you just decide you want to talk about it. And I think anytime a child has witnessed anything, even if it's an 11-month-old and there was a fist fight in their home, it's important that somebody says, this is what you saw, it was real, you felt probably like the adults were out of control, to name it, to talk about it from a relational perspective for the child. But having said that, if you just want to have a conversation about anti-Semitism, if that's the question, how to start talking about that, I think you have to think about anti-Semitism as an aspect of your identity as a Jewish person. What is the word? It is a truth of being part of a minoritized group. We do experience anti-Semitism. It happened in this particular incident in a bold way that we all know have common imagery and language to talk about, but we don't talk enough about, as a community, about the intersection of white privilege and Jewish identity and what happens when you get involuntarily moved into one or the other. We don't talk about microaggressions that Jewish people experience and how gender may augment or play a role in those microaggressions. And so the long answer is that as early as you can, you talk to your child about being Jewish. You name that, about being white if you're white, or about being Latinx or Black, if that is your racial identity. You just talk about those things, you name them, you get ahead of being the person who's going to say what that is. And there will be organic opportunities to say, part of the beauty of being Jewish, we get to be part of this community that we love so much, that has this rich history. We're connected to the generations, and also being part of a small group like this in the United States, where there's so many groups of people, is that sometimes we have experiences where people assign group-based thinking to us. You could be the first Jewish person someone ever meets. I sure have. I tell them those stories and about what I did to navigate it. What young children learn best by is when you make those moments really relational and personal, not when you have a perfect script that you're reading off the internet about like what anti-Semitism is. They want to know what it means to be me in the world, the person they love the most, and they want to know that I feel that about them. And then those conversations emerge.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So I want to move maybe to a question for our ADL partners, sort of a two-piece question. The first is, how can we be proactive in fighting this increase in anti-Semitism? And then the next piece of it is, what, if anything, is being done about this escalation, particularly of hate speech?
So those are two big questions. So let's take the second one first. So what is being done by the escalation of hate speech? So you've seen a lot more commentary about it. There's been several specials. CNN has done a special. MSNBC has done a special. Morning Joe has done work on it. So I think it's being talked about more. Certainly the president has had two summits. One was about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And then there was one yesterday that was organized by the White House, and it involved the second gentleman. So there's a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of testifying before Congress. There's been a lot of pushing forward backdoor conversations with groups that can help, such as Color of Change, Urban League, and NAACP, and others, to talk about how we bring everyone under one tent. When you talk about hate and bigotry, this is a very, very large tent. Erica mentioned a number of characteristics, and Alex mentioned, why it's important, and the sort of the ripple effect when one person with a characteristic is targeted, everyone feels it. So I know law enforcement cares about it. There's been summits with the state police. There's been a lot of activity. I don't know of really one local influencer, and I would put Congress, federal Congress people, state representatives, local law enforcement, all the types of people that look at safety and security. And the FBI is another group that's been at our office recently to talk about this. So I think law enforcement and influencers are talking about it. I think what the difference is now there's been social commentary, and you've seen people like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar weigh into things. And for every incident that happens on the internet, there's been people that have weighed in. It requires everyone to talk in a strong voice about what's acceptable and what's not. So that's what is being done. What continues to need to be done is to strengthen hate crimes laws and make sure that the ordinances are in place. Here in Michigan, covers two hate crimes laws cover us. One is the federal law, that's the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Act, and one is the state law is the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act law. So there's state statutes, and then there's federal statutes. But to Alex's point, a crime has to occur for those things to take effect. I think the other part of it, when you talk about general anti-Semitism, when many of the incidents that are reported are harassment or vandalism, and yes, vandalism is a crime, but it's not the type of thing that we saw at Temple Bethel. So when you look at the overarching things that are happening to people, those are things that are happening in schools. I can tell you, when an incident is reported to us and it involves a school, we run right in, work with the school to try and ameliorate the situation, try and help the school learn from it. We went from 6 schools in our No Place for Hate program last year. We have more than 40 schools signed up this year. I think it's at 42 right now. And so those are active pieces, things that we were not seeing before. So I think that there is some cause for celebration and that things are being done. And the second question, Rabbi, was about what?
So how can we be proactive? How can we use our voices to
Okay.
join maybe the social commentary?
Yeah. So I would say make sure you understand what's being done at the local level in terms of your community. Make sure you understand what Temple is doing. Go to things like this. Every single thing that you can learn about an anti-Semitic trope and how to disarm it is a step in the right direction. Emily talked about a lot of resources. You could spend a long time on the ADL website or the Michigan Department of Civil Rights website or the FBI website or the Attorney General's website and glean information. Erica presented a bunch of different resources also. Understanding when you can speak out and what you should say is a way to garner that general malaise of that's happening on a one-on-one basis. And then make sure that your elected officials care about this. That is something you can vote to make sure that people that you vote for are talking about this issue. And we just had an election, but there's always local elections. And let me just say, school boards, politics is local. School boards, understanding who's in charge at the school board, understanding what they're saying, that's crucial.
Great, thank you. So moving from that back to a bit of our own personal mental health, there was a question that came through about how we can move forward when we might have had this experience at our job. So for people who are employed at Temple Bethel and have really were at the forefront a few weeks ago, and I think really Dr. Bachnick and Julia, this one's really for you. How can we move forward when we've really had that very personal, scary experience?
Julia, do you want to field that one or do you want me to?
If you want to start and then I can chime in.
Sure. I mean, I think all of the strategies I presented that are for young children, human beings actually don't change their basic human needs and capacities developmentally. The idea that young children have a need that adults don't have is really based on the fact that we have expectations that adults really compress those needs over time. So just because suppression strategies work better for you. They don't work well for anyone, but they work better for you in the moment to get through the day of your job. Suppression strategies include things like breathing away your feelings, distracting yourself in various ways. Those kinds of things are short-term strategies for the moment. Long-term strategies for health and healing are the same as what young children need, and that is relationships. Make sure that you have supportive people in your life, supportive people in the workplace. If you need a moment, you need to step away. Make sure that you're doing restorative things, but not in isolation. Not healing in the long term unless there's a person sitting at the table with you in conversation. And again, thinking really about meaning, purpose, and belief systems, because trauma impacts us at the level of those kinds of overarching fears and worries about safety. Anxiety is when the need to solve problems gets stuck in the thought part of your brain because there really is no solution. So you ruminate on it because you think there should be a solution. You get stuck and it can't get out of that part of your brain into either action or feeling. So what do you do about that? There's a couple of things. Of course, you think about moving, taking action, and or going back to your feelings, but also I think of it as like jiggling the ice in the ice tray. You need somebody else to be able to share it with until it melts. You need to also be flexible, the jiggle. You need to think about like maybe not holding that thought in your brain. It's maybe not for you to solve. You're not a security expert. You're not responsible for all the hate in the world. And, likely, I don't see this as pessimism, anti-Semitism is not going anywhere. And so instead of thinking kind of fixating, I think it's really important to sort of add what are inherently Jewish perspectives on life and the meaning of life, and that to wonder and to really lean into flexible thinking about purpose and meaning.
Yeah, and I know a lot in our crisis response work is around this idea of like shifting the narrative and really, thinking about what are we telling ourselves? What is the story that we're telling ourselves? And as much as when trauma has happened, we can continue to feel unsafe long after the threat has gone. And so as much as we can, reminding ourselves like, yes, this happened, this was the response, and the event is over. And so trying to kind of put some time constraints around it and distance ourselves from it, but just thinking about kind of, the narrative that we're telling ourselves and seeing if we can shift it in a way. And I think, like Dr. Bachnick said, is being active, kind of asking that question of, now what? We can't sit in this and we have to move forward. And so what does that now what look like for us?
Thank you. That's very helpful. Emily, this one maybe is a little bit more for you, although I think others can jump in. What is your advice for high school and college students who don't necessarily have a strong Jewish identity when something anti-Semitic is said? The tendency may be to ignore, to not draw attention to themselves, but what would your recommendation be for these high school and college students who might be facing it, particularly on campus?
Well, on campus is a really tricky other situation. I do think it's important for high schoolers and college age kids to disrupt the behavior. And that's what we sort of talked about with those questions. Ask a question. What do you mean? It doesn't have to be a complicated question. It just disrupting the anti-Semitic behavior when it first happens. I think on college campuses, it does get a lot more complicated, and we have resources that will help educate you about anti-Semitism, about anti-Zionism, and the crossover. I think it is really important for kids to have that vocabulary, and adults too, to have that vocabulary and really brush up on what it means, what they might face when they get to college campuses, because the anti-Semitism is really in your face in a way that I'm hearing more and more. Kids just are not expecting it. So again, you can use our resources. There's so many other great resources out there too, but educate yourselves about kind of the history of Israel, the history of Zionism, so that you can be prepared to answer those questions in the moment.
I want to just add to that from my rabbi educator perspective, that your clergy are always available to help in those situations also. So whether you are a student on or a parent or a grandparent who have students in those situations, as they happen, please feel free to connect them to any one of us. We are always available to be helpful, to supportive, to provide language, to provide resources. We want to be your partner in providing the education and the support network that our students on all campuses need when they're facing anti-Semitism. So there were a few questions specific to the incidents lately and security. So I'm going to let Carolyn answer those, but I also just want to make sure everyone on here is aware of the program happening at Temple Bethel on Wednesday evening, where there will be Gary Sikorsky and police officers really specifically focusing on the community response and security surrounding these incidents. So if you want more information than we're going to provide, join us there on Wednesday evening, because that's the focus of that program. But Carolyn, I'm going to let you answer a couple of these. There were questions about whether there were multiple sources recently or just a few, and also police response, particularly at Temple Bethel.
So let's take the incident at Temple Bethel. When that happened, it happened very quickly and it was over very quickly. And so what happened was Temple Bethel had a person come up to them in a car. He was asking people as they walked into the synagogue to drop their kids off to preschool, do you support Israel? When they said yes, he was videotaping himself doing this. And when they said yes, he started cursing and yelling and questioning that. And it was terrifying. It was not an act of terrorism. He didn't have a weapon. And when he was approached by security at Temple Bethel, they said, you have no business here, you must leave. He did leave. So he wasn't ticketed for trespassing, because when he was asked to leave, he did leave. So, and the incident, they immediately called 911. Bloomfield Hills came, and then there was a traffic stop. Many of you have seen the video. He videotaped himself. This is a technique that harassers use. Members of the Goyim Defense League use this technique, where they videotape themselves harassing people, and then they put it up on the internet. In this particular case, there's no evidence to suggest that this particular person was from the Goyim Defense League, which is a virulent anti-Semitic group. And I never talk about it. I never use their name when I'm talking to the media, because I don't want to give them any oxygen. But that's a group that does this. In this particular case, the man used a similar technique, and it's been used at the Grove Market. It's been used. People who want to sow discord, want to get their word out and get their information out. So he was videotaping himself so he could put it up on the internet. And then I'll let the Bloomfield Hills Police talk about the way the traffic stop was handled. There was problems with the traffic stop, but from the time the incident occurred, law enforcement was engaged. ADL was contacted by a member of the clergy at Temple Bethel. We initially reached out to our Center on Extremism, which is a group of ADL specialists across the country that specialize in extremist behavior. They started doing background checks to be able to give to law enforcement on the man's social media imprint so that they could share it with law enforcement. I contacted the FBI, made sure the federal agency knew about it, knowing that Gary Sikorsky and his team were on site. This is a partnership. This is where I talked about the fact that we all have our roles to play. And so every one of us, and I know people from the Federation and every member of clergy and every synagogue started getting calls about this. So I would say initially for this particular incident, law enforcement was engaged right away. I do want to make sure people understand. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes when something like this happens. And I see Chief Patton's on here. There's many times where law enforcement is engaged and working and getting warrants and getting search warrants and things like that. And they are not going to express that to members of the general public. They don't want to do anything that's going to scuttle an investigation. So I do want to make sure that people understand, sometimes you have to trust that there are things going on behind the scenes that you don't know. In this particular case, this was a very, very public incident. And that's what made it terrifying and terrible, in the fact that it was involving young children. But the majority of the incidents that are happening are not that way. Many of them, at least the ones that our office is looking at, they're mostly incidents in schools, one-on-one. A Heil Hitler as a Jewish kid is walking into the locker room, a swastika carved on a desk, inappropriate comments made by teachers. None of those are appropriate, by the way. None of them are things that we should let go. And ADL pushes our way into every school door and every community opportunity that we can to affect a change when that happens. Sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not, but we always call it out. In terms, I wanted to talk about the question that said, are the majority, are these threats coming from the same source or from multiple sources? Some of them they're coming from all over, different types of threats. I know some of you are very well aware of the bomb threats that have happened at the Frankel Jewish Academy. FBI is very well aware of them, and that is about 20% of there's about more than 500 incidents that have occurred in this country from January 4th through right now. I think the last number was 510 when I talked to the FBI on Thursday. 20% of them have been against Jewish communal buildings or Jewish day schools, and about 75 to 80% of them have been to historically Black colleges and universities. This is largely known by the FBI as a group of people overseas that are trying to sow discord. That doesn't mean that it's not a real incident, because what happens to Chief Patton is he gets a call that there's been a bomb threat, and he to go into action. This is kind of a SWAT, this is what's called swatting, is calling out the SWAT teams when nothing is really there. And so it's designed to cause discord. And I think Erica talked about disempowering people. That's exactly what it's trying to do. And it's working, because there's not one member of law enforcement that I know that does anything but take every single one of these seriously. And, so you can put those sort of in a bucket of those right now in the last year, this 500, more than 500 that the FBI has looked at. And again, Jewish communal buildings and historically Black colleges and universities are in that bucket. Then there's the social media that we talked about. And this is really ramping up, and it's with memes and jiffies or giffies, or whatever you want to call them, the moving pictures that are just really designed to upset people and throw things over the wall. And then there are the incidents that are one-on-one. That's the majority that is causing this high level of anxiety, because those are the ones that you all are hearing from your children, your grandchildren, your great nieces, your best friend's daughter, all of those. And those are the ones that we have a better chance of really, really affecting a change with, because a lot of them happen in schools. So that's a quick nutshell version. I think that answered the two questions.
Yeah, thank you. So just with a few minutes remaining, there are just sort of two questions I want to touch on. Really, the first, you mentioned, Carolyn, from the perspective of anti-Semitic acts on social media, but I want to talk about social media from the other perspective. And on the one hand, sometimes it's very useful because can spread information and have a community and a supportive community to exchange information with. And sometimes it's not so helpful. So in circumstances when there are incidents, and maybe Julia and Dr. Bachnick from your perspective, but also from ADL, and Alex, you can weigh in on this also. At what point are you finding it helpful? At what point are you finding it harmful, particularly from a mental health perspective? How should we be thinking about using it as individuals, and then also with regard to our children? There's a lot of questions all in one, sorry.
I'll let the mental health professionals talk about how should we be using social media from that perspective. I will weigh in on, and Emily, I'd encourage you if you have something to add after I'm done. From my perspective, we want to understand the incident that happened. Emily and Alex talked about reporting. This is crucial. So helping us to understand, capturing information is helpful. Also, sharing information when you know it's factual is helpful. But I would say really, really, stop yourself from just throwing something over the wall on social media when you're not sure exactly what happened. And I'm just going to use Temple Bethel as an example. I was seeing things on Friday afternoon, the day it happened, that said imminent threat at Temple Bethel, terrorists at Temple Bethel. Neither one of those things were true. By the time somebody put imminent threat on the social media, the threat was over, and it was one person who was asked to leave and he left. And I do not want to minimize what happened. I want you to understand, I think what happened was terrible and terrifying. And I am not justifying anybody's behavior, but in the realm of trying to help the situation, it does not help to not know your facts and throw something over social media. I would also say, using this or your computer, go to authentic sites. ADL, ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, Michigan Department of Civil Rights, FBI, Attorney General's Office. Those are the area. West Bloomfield Police. Those are the areas that you can really trust for information. That's what I would say. And Emily, do you have anything else to add in terms of?
Well, I think just to know how to report things to the platforms, and know that once you report something to a platform, you can also report it to ADL with screenshots. I definitely will defer to the mental health experts as to, children and screen time. I know from my own perspective, sometimes I just have to walk away from social media. I do think, however, it is a powerful tool for us to stand up for hate speech, for us to share positive messages. So I think there's, a lot of opportunity for balance and knowing your own limitations.
I want to say a couple of things. One is that social media, there's evidence around like positive impacts of building community through social media, and especially in terms of activism. So I want to just talk about exactly what that is and what that means, because I think we as a Jewish community in some ways are sort of new at this, and there are people who have been doing it, like Black women who we can learn from. What do you do to really use social media to confront discrimination and violence? What you don't do is to just keep sharing harmful images and sort of, one sentence kind of saying this thing happened. That is a thing that contributes to harm in terms of the overexposure to aggression and violence. And also, again, it's that thing about like jiggling the ice and getting it to move. There's no movement there. We're just re-experiencing. And when we talk to people about like balance and screen time, some of us just don't have that luxury, depending on what you do professionally and the ways that you might be kind of like locked in to screen use. And so we have to start talking about this in more nuanced ways. It's not just about limiting your exposure, but you have to think about yourself as an active citizen responsible for how you contribute to what is essentially throwing up posters in Times Square with people who are kind of trapped there, right? So you have to really think about the broader ecology. Activism online is often done meaningfully through calls to action, coalition building, and also spreading positive imagery about your community to disrupt stereotyping that's negative. So think about really being able to contribute, engage in those ways. And again, thinking about shared responsibility, how do you amplify and support other groups' activism so that we are part of broad coalitions and not working in a vacuum?
Thank you very much, Julie. Are you adding on to that?
I can, but I also feel like everyone did a great job of answering that question. But I think just adding, that we do have to be mindful also of how we use social media. And I think recognizing too that when we're putting something out there, we're not necessarily getting consent from the other person of what they're going to be receiving. And so I think things like disclaimers, trigger warnings, or just understanding, and again, being responsible about what we're posting and recognizing that maybe not everyone is in a place where they want to see this, can see it, can hear it right now, and just being really mindful. And then on the flip side, that might mean I'm going to leave this Facebook group, or I'm going to not delete Facebook and take a break or do what we need to do, but also doing what you need to do to take care of your mental health. And if you're noticing that something is impacting you negatively, and that it is re-traumatizing, that it's important to take a step back.
Yeah. I know there are a handful of questions that maybe we didn't get to tonight, so please feel free to contact us. We're happy to have a continued conversation individually. I want to thank our presenters again so much for taking the time, for being wonderful partners. And I just want to make sure everyone who's here really recognizes how fortunate we are to be part of this local community with so many different resources, from ADL and the Attorney General's office to mental health experts who can really support us through all of this. And of course, Temple Israel and local clergy. Please always feel free to reach out to us. We will be putting contact information and resources in an email, so you can look for that tomorrow. And I want to wish everybody an early, happy Hanukkah, peaceful, joyful Hanukkah. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.